The Village of Bartlett Committee of the Whole meeting for January 3rd, 2017. I call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Trustee Ahrens?
Here.
Hammer?
Here.
Carbonaro?
Here.
Daney?
Here.
Hopkins?
Here.
Ranky?
Present.
President Wallace.
Here. Only item we have this evening is under Planning and Zoning Committee, and that will be President or Chairman Ranky.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have three principal items on the agenda this evening for our input to the staff for forwarding these matters onto the Zoning Board of Appeals, generally described as beekeeping, chickens, and impervious surface. Jim, do you have any comments that you want to make relative to your report?
I just wanted to state that as our last discussion on this, which was in June, the board directed staff to do some additional research, which we have done on all three of those items regarding beekeeping and the insurance, excluding pools on impervious surface, and also additional research on chickens and the different areas where chickens could be kept. What we've done is we've put together in our staff memo the different conditions that we would do in a draft text amendment for a public hearing in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I can go in and just detail those
Well, I guess that sort of dovetails with one of my questions or comments. I know that this hasn't been before the ZBA yet,
right.
but what you've given us here is not an amendment to the zoning ordinance.
No.
It's just sort of a general description.
It's items that we feel if we do a text amendment for the zoning board that these should be included, and they're here for your discussion to either include, exclude, or if you like them all, direct us to prepare with the village attorney a draft text amendment for the zoning board's public hearing.
Okay, so then I imagine it would be the committee's desire to go through each one of these in turn. Do we start with beekeeping for comments to the staff?
That'd be a good idea.
It's the first thing, so why not?
Yeah.
Okay, so comments regarding beekeeping to the staff?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I appreciate what the staff has done in gathering their information. You guys have done your due diligence, and I really appreciate that. I think when we're talking about bees, people have the misconception that bees are wasp and things of that nature. They get scared of honeybees where they shouldn't be. I think we have a lot of potential to at least allow people to do things that will build a better community and a better environment, and I think the bees are right up there with it. So I would certainly like to see at least what's been proposed by the staff to go on through to the planning and zoning, I think it was, or wasn't it?
As we have discussed beekeeping, and since June, I've gotten a lot of input from residents, and I'm a little more skeptical about beekeeping today than I was back in June. Obviously, we still need to forward this along. I understand bees are important to the ecosystem, but one of the things I am very concerned about is people who are allergic to bees. I had no idea how many people were allergic to bees. People aren't necessarily allergic to chickens that way, but certainly. And I don't think that we should do a community apiary, and I think that's something that we should give specific direction to staff on, is whether we want to pursue the notion of the community apiary or not. I think it's another one of those good ideas, but at the same time it would cost an awful lot of money. And I think there's some people who aren't interested in a community apiary. I think I've heard a number of people who are in favor of bees are not interested in the community apiary. So I think that might be problematic from a cost perspective and a liability perspective. I know we've got an insurance quote in here for $1 million policy, but I don't know. I guess if things go really wrong, I don't know if $1 million is going to be enough for bees, and I don't know what anybody else's thoughts are on the community apiary.
I would say no on that. I think that the village doesn't need to spend money on an apiary. I think if someone wants a hive on their property, I think they should be allowed to have it. I don't necessarily agree with the annual $25 fee. I think maybe a one-time $25 fee would be more appropriate. I don't think we're going to have, tons of residents getting beehives. I think if someone does want it, they should have that option. I also see note D, barrier heights and things of that nature, a 5-foot fence. I think that's a good idea in, small lots, but I think if someone has a yard, or, an acre or two, and you're 50 feet or 100 feet away from a property line, I don't think we should make someone set up, a fence around their beehives. So I don't know if some language like that could be incorporated into this. And I also would like to see, it says a maximum of 25 residential zoning lots. I would like to see something like at 20, it triggers a review by the village board to either open it up or actually review the policies that we set. Because let's say we have, 25 hives and we have had no complaints, why not let more residents do it? So maybe a trigger mechanism in place to either make it more restrictive or open it up to more residents. So those are kind of my thoughts. I think the less restriction, the better on this. I think I don't know how many naturally occurring hives there are in Bartlett, but I'm sure there's a lot more than 25. So I think by adding 25 or 50 hives is not going to be a big deal. So, yes. Yes.
You want the number of permits issued to go up?
Yeah, but I think we should review it once it hits 25. If we have 20 permits pulled, I think the village board should review the ordinance and actually look at it to see if it's been successful or if we need to modify it. So,
I think both with regards to the bees and the chickens, we should probably treat the permits like we do with liquor licenses. That there should be a fixed number, and if we need to create one, we'll create a new permit. I think 25 is high. I actually think 25 is high, especially when we're talking about something that is such a change for some of our residents. And it is, let's be honest, it is very scary for people.
I think you may be exaggerating that a little bit, trustee.
Well, let me finish my statement, then you get to talk. This is how it works. So it is scary to some people, but I think we need to sort of ease them into that and get them educated on the process and what is it going to be like to live next door to a beehive, what's it going to be like to live next door to chickens. So I think that incremental process, I think that will work, not as a way of preventing people from doing it, but as a way of kind of getting us all used to this. And because you look at the emails and people are convinced that we're going to be overrun by bees and chickens, and that's not going to happen. It's not.
And I don't want to see more regulations if we don't have to. That's what we're trying to get away from, is over-regulating, which we're known for. So let's not over-regulate something if we don't have to.
exactly, and that's why I think a trigger mechanism at 20 permits would be a good idea. We can keep it at 25 after our review, or we could raise it or lower it, or...
I have no problems with having a review at some point in time, as long as we move forward and let this go.
Yeah.
Jim, how many people have requested any information about having their own hives on their property in the 20 years you've been here? 20, 30 years?
Well, it's increased recently, but in my 20 years on beehives, none.
None.
Just in the last couple of, actually, I shouldn't say none. We have a couple.
Couple now?
Yeah, a couple now.
Yeah, so even if we set it at 20, we're probably...
Lots more
I
chickens.
think if we set it at 20 or 25.
That would be
I
the
think
suggestion of the board. I think that's a fair statement with the beehives. Does anybody have any problems
Chickens may go more.
suggesting that the planning start at 20?
I just wanted to make mention of the fact that I think all the comments this evening all have a great deal of merit regarding this. I haven't had anyone, contact me about the bees or chickens. No one, and I was surprised because it's a common known fact this is coming up. And I think what was said this evening, was very important. I'd really like to see what the comments are from the ZBA. In addition to what was said this evening.
Is everybody at least in agreement that we do not want a community or a community apiary.
I believe that's,
At this time,
Yeah,
at this time.
yeah.
I don't want
that's
to,
the
I don't want to
case.
I don't want to say we're going to shut the door on this forever.
The community one, I mean.
That's what I'm saying, the community one, yeah. I mean, even at that point, if we allowed individuals to do this, and somehow we came up with the land that somebody donated, or somebody wanted to come in and say, hey, I'll give this amount of money if you build an apiary, I don't want to shut the door on that.
Does Hanover Park allow people from outside the village to create a hive in their village?
They have a community apiary.
I know, but do they allow?
I don't think
people
they
from
do
Bartlett to go-
anything but that. Yeah, and I think if you're from Bartlett, I think they give preference to their residents, but I don't think they shut
There's
it.
someplace relatively close if you want to have a hive and this doesn't go through that you could.
A couple people we've directed to that. I think Schaumburg's starting one up too, community apiary.
I don't really like that idea because I think in your guys' notes here, it says a typical insurance policy that the village would make a resident have is between $250 and $500 a year.
Bees.
So at that point, would someone honestly want to have a beehive at $500?
Well, like I said, not at this time. Let's move on with letting individuals have it, not worry about an apiary at this time, but just not closing the door for the future at some point in time.
I just want to clarify one thing on your comment. In drafting the ordinance to put in a review at 25 is a little problematic. I think you can direct staff to bring it back at that point, but I don't want to have it conditioned on, its effectiveness. I think Trustee Ranke's point about a certain number, like a liquor license, when you hit it, then you'd have to come to us to increase that number.
Yeah.
But if you want to review it at any time.
The end
that's
result
fine.
is the
I
same.
want to make it a condition in the ordinance. Sometimes sunset clauses and stuff like that, they fall through the cracks, and then you've got,
But the end result's the same,
Timing.
really.
I just
Yeah.
don't want to see a resident go through more hassle or cost than necessary.
well, yeah, as long as we trigger it, a review of it, as
Yeah.
we direct staff to do that, it comes back, and you can always amend it at any time. But rather than make the ordinance sunset or a provision like that, I think it'd be, from a legal standpoint, just in the drafting, preferable to have a number, and then you can always amend that number. How easy is it that we, another Class A liquor license would be another beekeeping license, or create another 5, whatever you may feel is necessary depending on the demand and how it's working
Yeah.
out.
I mean, like I said, either way, the end result's the same. It's just whatever's easier from a policy standpoint, which I think the license thing would be easier once it hits a maximum. Let me ask you a really crazy question. Is there anything other than honey that come out of these hives? I mean, is there any other byproducts of these hives that people sell? Wax? That
Or
another
the
thing that
farmers.
people sell and...
There's no entertainment feature.
maybe
I think that you can get other different products. I know the wax, I don't know if they do soap, with the bees, but
Okay.
honey's the big one, that most of the local people are selling.
You wanna...
My question is for the folks in the audience that are interested in bees. I think I saw 2 hands, one on the left and one on the right. What size lots do you live on? Do you know?
My house is about 101 by 101, it's a corner lot in Bartlett.
Okay.
So it's relatively
Okay. And you, ma'am? Okay. 2/3 of an acre. Okay, so this would, as currently outlined, it would probably work for both
yeah.
of these folks. Okay.
His might be
It might-
100 by 100.
I think it's 100 by 101 or something, 101.
So that's
Oh,
10,000.
It's over
A
10,000.
little over
it's over
10,000.
10,000, right?
Okay.
okay.
I would, I'm just looking at this, and number E, a source of water shall be available at all times to the bees. We may want to elaborate on that. Your neighbor's pool shouldn't be a source of water.
I think it's meant for the beekeeper to have a source of water available for the bees to use.
On the property. So, I mean,
Not
we need-
on the property.
Yeah, we
correct?
need to
All this
elaborate.
pertains to what you would be required to be on your property
Okay.
if you were to have a hive.
Jim, let me ask you a question here. We're talking about 10,800 square feet, but one of the things this evening that brought this to mind is, let's say somebody does have a lot that's slightly smaller than that. they would still have the option of going before the ZBA, correct?
Not unless you create that in the ordinance.
There's no real variance size for that. It's not like a setback variance or anything, and I don't know if you could create a lot size variance, Brian?
Probably not, unless you
Yeah,
put
unless
that
you put it in
the initial
text
ordinance.
amendment, unless you put it in
You
the
could set
text.
the number at 10,000, and this gentleman would be okay if he's right on his dimensions. At 10.8, you might have trouble.
Couldn't we
Well,
put,
I'd like to see a little more, a little more discretion that we would have with this,
why wouldn't we lower the lot size to 8,100 like with the chickens?
because we don't review it then. I'd like to have the opportunity of reviewing it. If we have this in the ordinance, 10,800, and somebody comes in with something less, I'd like us to have the opportunity, the village to have the opportunity of reviewing that.
Why?
I have a question. If we're going to make someone keep it 25 feet from all lot lines, does it matter the square footage of their lot? If they don't meet that setback, then they shouldn't be allowed to have why don't we
You
just
could change the
eliminate
lot sizes.
footage of the lot?
You could change the lot sizes. We felt that the bigger lots for the bees would be a little safer, bearing in mind what Trustee Ranky indicated, that people are allergic, so you'd have a bigger lot size. If you want to make the lot sizes, and we went with existing zoning districts, if you want to make the lot size just a standard, 8,000 for both of them, and then you're right, then the setbacks have to adhere. You'd have to stick it in the middle off of the 25 feet off of all the yards.
That's not what I
You want to
asked.
let that could,
I understand what you're saying. What I asked is if you left it at 10,800.
Right.
The chickens is a different issue. We'll deal with that later. I would like to see some flexibility. I would like to see a review. If somebody came in with a 8,000 square foot lot, that we would take a look at that and we could have, make a judgment based on location, based on the complexion of the neighborhood, whatever it may be. The things that we looked at as commissioners. And
How would you create standards, though? I mean, how does the complexion of
the standard would be 10.8.
right,
But in terms of standards for
in terms of a variance?
your standard variation,
That would be at the discretion of the ZBA.
you have to, variations have to have standards to be valid. You can't just have it be at the discretion of a board without giving them standards to measure by. They meet them or they don't. You could try and tie in your standard variation standards, but those are really geared more for other things.
I think I understand what Trustee Daney's getting at, and I think part of what's making it a little more complicated is the fact that we're not looking at the zoning ordinance, So 25 feet has a different context in an R1 than it does in an R3. So, 10,800 has a different, connotation. So my suggestion is let's see what this looks like as part of an amendment to the zoning ordinance, and then let's talk about it, how it's going to play out. In my mind, I want to know if my setback for the apiary is 25 feet, what's the setback in an R2? What's the building setback in an R2? Is it 15 feet?
no, you're talking about front yard setbacks?
Let's put it in the backyard.
Backyards in the R2 would be 35, right? Oh, yeah, 50. SR2 is 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
you're
25 plus 50, like distance-wise from somebody's pool, somebody's shed, somebody's deck.
25 feet's a pretty severe setback in a lot, a smaller lot.
Right, but that goes to my point, that I think we should talk about this within the context of the zoning district. So I think it makes sense to revisit Trustee Daney's issue when we look at the actual amendment. But it seems like we're on the right track here.
Yeah.
My question too, Jim, would be why the 25 feet setback?
I think for the lessen the impact on the surrounding property owners who might not want the bees, you keep it away from the lot lines rather than, 5 feet is roughly from the wall to the edge of this, ledge right here. You put a beehive right there and you have a house that's 5 feet on the other side, you're 10 feet from the house. If you put 25-foot distance, you get a pretty good distance for those bees to disperse before they get to your neighboring property owners. Some of the research on beekeeping in yards had a pretty big setback.
Okay.
Just to minimize the impact on surrounding residents.
And if we don't do that, then we're sabotaging that which you were trying to accomplish. Because you're going to get somebody, like in my neighborhood, who's going to put an apiary within 5 feet of the fence, and my daughter's in the backyard playing. Well, people are going to get upset. So I think it makes sense. Let's take a look, and maybe what we could do as part of the final consideration is let's take a look at a couple of different potential sites.
And we'll put some diagrams
Put
together.
some GIS things
Right.
together
Right.
and look at it from that perspective.
Maybe there's a couple of people who'd be willing to volunteer their addresses to be sort of our case studies. That would be probably a good way of kind of looking at it graphically. Any other thoughts on the bee issue?
Just a couple of real quick points. Is there a specific distance that bees fly from this thing? Is there any research on like how far these
There
bees
is
go out and
research
come back
on
and
it.
go out and come back? Miles?
They'll go a long distance. I don't know what it is, but there was some information on how far away from their hive they'll travel to collect pollen.
Okay.
And there's some standards. I don't know if anybody,
Miles?
it'd be miles.
So one final question I would have, just for maybe the zoning board to discuss, this isn't for this committee. Who's liable if I have an apiary and my neighbor gets stung and they're allergic and major medical problems? What liability does the village have passing this ordinance?
I'll defer to our attorney.
The village wouldn't have it.
How do you prove it's not being nature?
Not.
Right, how do you
You're
prove
gonna
it?
have it labeled? You can't.
Valid
you can't
question.
prove that.
It's a proof question.
DNA B testing.
Yeah.
What address do you live at?
So they could go through some real
They would have
heavy-duty history
difficulty
saying,
suing
I've
the
lived
village.
here for 15 years and have never been stung, and I'm allergic, and now this person
They,
puts up this
well,
thing next to me and I get
there
stung.
may well be a lawsuit. That I think is likely, if that were to happen. Not to the village, but to the neighbor who has the apiary. The village has certain immunities that are being eroded, but nevertheless, I believe would apply in this situation to where the village may not have a liability issue. It likely would not. That doesn't mean, you won't get sued, but you have.
These are all of the things that we need to discuss
And I
in this
believe-
discussion.
I think that would be a good question to pose to Evanston or Palatine.
I'm not that concerned about liability to the village because of the communities being eroded or not. And then there's always the proof issue of the
DNA?
neighbor who was stung.
DNA?
How do you prove that it was a honeybee and where it came from? I think that makes it very difficult. So, there are many things allowed that
Okay.
you can get sued for.
Again, it wasn't for this
I'm worried
discussion.
about
It's something for the
liability.
planning zone to consider.
Okay.
So after this goes to the ZBA, is it going to come back to the village committee?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. You'll have the record of the public hearing.
Right.
Yeah, it was right back to us.
Okay, so that concludes our.
done?
Yeah, we're done with bees for this
Yeah.
evening. Chickens. Let's talk about chickens. Are there any comments from the committee?
Once again, I think the staff did a good job putting things together, looking at the sources. I think they also listened to a survey that was put out by the village as well, and that was overwhelmingly positive, as I understand. Once again, we've heard people speak, and people that have raised chickens, people that treat chickens or animals, and have some idea of what it would be to have animals on their property. And if done correctly, I think it can be beneficial from a green standpoint and from environmental standpoint, so many different things that we can help our community, help our environment. I just think it's a great direction for our village to go.
I have to agree with Trustee Kammerer. Is the $25 licensing fee, is that per year or
I think that's per permit.
per permit?
Yeah.
So there's no annual fees for residents?
We didn't do an annual fee for that.
Okay.
So that, I would go along with what you stated before, a one-time fee for the permit.
Oh, no, I'm going to let it go to the ZBA. Now's that time. I don't want, I don't think we should.
Do other communities only allow 4 chickens per lot?
It seems to be the, kind of the optimum number. Most of some of the towns we researched, I don't know of anybody, nobody allows 10 or 12. It's 4 is kind of a good working number, I guess, that produces enough eggs so people can have the eggs on a regular basis.
Did we obtain that number from looking at other ordinances
towns,
and other
yeah.
municipalities?
I think I read somewhere that a hen can produce an egg every 11 hours, if I'm not,
Isn't it 23 hours?
every
Or is it
day,
11?
roughly. Yeah, slows down.
Motivated chicken.
I have,
I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
have one question regarding F. The structure shall be heated, or an insulated blanket shall cover the structure during the winter months. Will this result in baked chicken?
Depends on the R rating.
What?
Ray.
Couldn't.
Baked chicken.
One of my questions is when we're learning about other communities and their experience with
Saw that.
are we also getting staff's input with regard to their experiences? So are we doing something more than ordinance?
Yeah, we're talking to the staff members in the towns and everything. To be honest with you, the most towns that have them, they have very little problems with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think so.
Right.
There was a young lady from Elgin that was helping us work with this, wasn't there?
There was a lady from Elgin, right?
Okay.
She's not here tonight, but, yeah. She's Jennifer's friend.
Do we restrict homeowners for how many dogs or cats they can have on their lot?
Yes.
Dogs or cats, pets are 3. No more than.
Gotta get rid of 2.
I can tell you, as one who has worked in those chicken places that produce eggs as a kid, they are the most inhumane places you'll see in the world. Because I took the chickens out and stuffed the chickens back into these little 1-by-1 crates, so it's pretty inhumane. My only comment on this, again, it's for planning and zoning, it's not for the board discussion now, is my biggest concern is the size of the lot, and then how much. I have very little concern about the noise because of what they've mentioned. How far that smell is going to travel. I know you're going to have some really good people that are going to take care of their chickens and some really bad ones, just like dog owners. And the bad ones are my biggest concern. So I need to have something in the policy that states it has to be odor-free, or there's a lot of different angles that we're going to have to look at here to make sure that we don't get somebody next to somebody that has this chicken coop with 4 chickens that are really annoying, but they're the only people that think they're annoying, and we have no retribution for those neighbors on both sides. So let's make sure we expand that conversation.
Well, and I would think if you're going to have annual permitting, so the permittees will file their application and somebody from the village staff will go out. And if it is an inhumane situation, you're going to be in a position to act, right?
I think we'll get complaints just like we get complaints about dogs or animals now. And that if we sometimes go into houses where the animals are, messy and we have to take action, we work with animal control on that.
But what about an annual inspection? Is that part of that? Is that part of the annual permit?
We did not incorporate an annual inspection. If you want that, we can.
More regulations.
Well, but I think if it's
Wait. I mean, think about what you're suggesting, because this is something the village is going to have to do. Right. This is an expense for one person to go around with some kind of expertise and inspect aviaries, chickens, whatever. Think about the ramifications of that suggestion. That's all I want to say.
So I think it's great that we're going to hopefully review this maybe in a year, and if we need to modify it, we can modify it. And I think the same thing goes for the bees. I think we should review the policy and see how many complaints we get. I'd also like to know how many dog and cat complaints we get every year.
The
bet the
police
number is
probably
pretty
get
high.
more than we do, but we do code enforcement on dog and cat homes, typically when it's an excessive amount of the animals and people are complaining.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you know, Chief here might get more dog barking complaints, dangerous dog bites, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so are there any more comments on chickens? Okay. So staff, you have enough to work on there?
I think we have,
And we'll pass that along.
and we'll
Okay.
create the text amendment and move it forward.
Thanks. And then with regards to the last item, the impervious surface, this was the addition of, or the exclusion of pools
Right.
from the impervious surface calculation because pools are meant to hold water.
And that's pretty straightforward.
Yes, I think that is pretty straightforward. Are there any comments?
No.
Okay.
Well, I want to make a quick comment. Right now, in the ordinance, we use the pool in the calculation, correct?
Yes,
So in the winter, that pool's covered.
yes.
So where does the water go? Does this create more drainage problems? Well, when the snow melts, it's not going in the pool, it's... Okay, I just want to make sure that you don't foresee any issues, mainly in the winter and into the spring, when snow melts, so.
Yeah, I mean, if we get like a 100-year rain event, we get 3 inches of rain, most people's pools are going to overtop or drain. But this would be sort of the everyday, we get maybe an inch, half an inch of rain.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to get your
Gives the homeowner a little break that has a pool on the imperviousness.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll forward all of this on to the ZBA for contemplation and hearings. I'm assuming that these good people are going to show up and make their comments heard as well.
Yes, and we'll keep them informed on it, so, when it is, the hearings.
Right. And no more surprise surveys, huh?
The surprise survey was
Surprise survey.
a test. Yeah, we're going to do survey something else after this.
Well, I think it's important when we do surveys. I think it's a great thing. Obviously, there's limitations, and they're not exactly scientific, but it's very important to word the survey in a neutral sense, rather than seeming like we're advocating a position, because I think that puts some people off. I mean, I obviously have my own personal feelings on the subject, but if we're going to solicit people's input, let's try to be as neutral and open-ended as
Fair
possible.
and balanced.
Good.
So, Mr. President, that's all we have for planning and zoning
Thank you,
tonight.
Chairman Ranky. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by trustee Cameron, seconded by trustee Hopkins. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Aaron's? Camera?
Yes.
Carbonaro?
Yes.
Daney?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Ranky?
Yes.